you doing, guys? Before we jump into doing some work, I thought I'd show you the parts that I've collected thus far for the front end of my Senior. I believe I showed the bearings in a prior video, but I'll just go over all of it right now just so everybody knows what I am putting into this thing. I'll start from the left and I'll move to the right. I did acquire the end links for the steering bars. I ended up finding out that my particular tractor uses parts from a 49 Jeep CJ2. I tried other years of Jeeps, and the reason why I used the Jeep in general was because the raw steering box that are in these tractors are typically found in Jeeps. So I kind of figured that Wheel Horse would use something from a Jeep, and I ended up nailing it after some tries at Napa. It did work out to be a 1949 Jeep CJ2. So I have the left and I have the right. You can see they're just standard style end links. The part number for the left is ES62L and the right is ES140R. I did get them from, I got 3 of them from Napa, 1 off of eBay. Actually, this is the one off of eBay. And of course, the top of it is shaped just a hair different. It sticks up just a little bit higher. So I'm going to put that one on the steering box, the one that's popped up a little higher. And then the ones that you all see, the 3 of them look just like this one. So I'll use those where they're visually a little bit more, seen. As you know, those are the front wheel bearings. The part numbers are right there. And I've already used those in order to kind of center up the rims. They are going to work just fine. What I have here is all the raw materials in order to rebuild the spindles. And I called up my friends at McMaster Car, as you see, and they were more than happy to take my money. With that, I have all the bushings. I have 6 bushings. Inner diameter is 1 inch. Outer diameter is 1 1/8. They're just standard oil impregnated bronze bushings. Those are going to be for all the spindles and for the center bolt. What we have here is the piece of 3/4 inch bar stock. This is going to be the lower part of the spindle where I thread it for the nut, set it for the cotter pin. I got 2 12-inch pieces of 1 inch bar stock. These guys are going to become the basically the pedestal of the spindle. I got some large, heavy-duty, thick washers. These are going to be the washers that are welded to the 1 inch bar stock and will ultimately carry the weight of the front axle. I have these 3/4 inch, or I should say, it's 1 inch by 2 inches. So inner diameter 1 inch, outer diameter 2 inch. That's the original size of the washers on the tractor now. These are the 3/4 inch inner, 2 inch outer, and they get welded to the 3/4 inch bar stock. This becomes the back plate for the bearing, and I'll show you how all that goes shortly. The other thing I bought too is I bought a brand new square bolt. This is the main bolt that runs through the front of the tractor in order to become the pivot point of the front axle. So with that, and this is what, 3/4 by, I believe this was 8 inches. Yes, 3/4 by 8 square head. That way it looks just like the original, but is replaced because the original one, number one, is all butchered at the threaded end, and also it's bent. So I didn't feel like dealing with that. All right, so what are we going to do today? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the old bushings from the front axle. As you can see, this particular bushing has already been removed. And this one came out okay. I did scratch the inside of the pipe a little bit, but just like the removal of the bar stock from the knuckles, I basically take my hacksaw, I make a, I make a score cut all the way down the bushing with the hacksaw, and then I take a punch and just curl the corners in. I take a small screwdriver, which is right there, and then just send the screwdriver down into the, basically right underneath the cut. So that way I could fold each side of the bushing up. Now, I did mar up the end here a little bit, but what are you going to do? It just happens that way. Then next, I take my bigger punch here, catch the edge of the bushing, okay, like this, and hit it until it moves. And as you can see, it's just a hair pushed in or set in. So this bushing started to move. Now to get it out, I'm going to spin the axle tube around and use this piece of 3/8 bar stock in order to catch the lower edge of the bushing and also put force on it so it stays on the edge of that bushing, and I should be able to hammer it out. So let me flip this thing around, get the bar stock in place, and start trying to remove this. To finish up the removal of the bushings, what I did was I took basically a chainsaw sharpening file, because they have nice fine teeth, and just went around the inner edge of the tube. I also took a flat file, which is right there, and did the fascia, hit it with some sandpaper, and essentially this is nice and clean. You could put the bushings right back into this. Both of the lower sides are finished, so I'm pretty psyched about that. Everything looks good. I'm going to do the top side. The top sides weren't as hard to get out as you could see in that second video, but I'm getting there. So I'm going to do the top sides, clean those all up, get that ready. I would typically install the new bushings at this point in time, but I'm going to hold off on the pretense that I still haven't figured out whether or not I'm going to leave this tractor all patinaed up or I'm going to paint it. Now, I would put the bushings in first before I was to paint this, but I'm still teeter-tottering on it. I know the last time I asked about that, most people said to go ahead and restore it and repaint it. So I may do that. My buddy's been hounding me, say, look, man, just bring it over to the shop when you're ready, and we'll go ahead and shoot this project. I don't know yet. So moving on. Next is to fix the broken pivot. As you can see, it's clear cut, broke off. What I need to do is get all the grease out of it. There's two bushings in this tube. I'm not going to replace them yet. And the reason for that is I'm going to re-weld this into place with the bar in the center, and I'll show you how I do that in a few minutes. But essentially that's going to line it up for me, so that way when I weld this back together, we should be fine. The other thing I'm going to do, which I know might be sacrilegious to some people, is I'm planning on making some gussets, front, top, bottom, left, right. That way we don't have this situation happening again, and I'll explain how it kind of happened in a few minutes. With the axle situated in front of the tractor, we can kind of get a visual of what transpired. As you may know, the main bolt that holds the axle in place and is the pivot of the front axle goes through here. It actually goes through the front of the frame. Along the inside of that tube, there's a back plate, and then there's a nut and a washer that holds the whole thing together. If we look at the general design of this front axle, we can see why it breaks. Number one, I guess the riser tubes here lift that front tube up pretty high, and with it being as wide as it is, you know, this is the focal point of all the stress. In other words, as the wheels are traveling, this tube wants to go back and forth, twisting the pipe. And then as you hit things, or things hit this or that side, the whole bar wants to torque this way. So not only are you getting a twisting motion and a torque motion, ultimately, there was no way that this single little tube was going to survive any period of time. So that's number one. Number two, if we sight down my tube itself, I don't think the camera will pick it up, but you can just barely see that it's got a crown to it. In other words, all the years of taking shots here and taking shots here on the ground, it basically put a light bend in the pipe. Basically starts right from there and then goes this direction and starts there and goes this direction. It's very slight. It's like less than a quarter of an inch. It's like 3/16 of an inch, something like that. I was thinking about cutting the pipe here and heating it up with a torch and straightening it out and then re-welding it. But I think it's best that I just leave it alone. I'm not going to mess with it. Once you put it back in the tractor, you're never going to notice it. I am going to add my gussets to the front here, in these areas. So that's going to be totally strengthened up. The other thing I'm going to do is this end of the pipe is nice and sharp. The edges are nice and sharp. On this side of the pipe, though, unfortunately, whoops, it's a little mangled. So I'm going to weld the edge of that pipe and straighten that out. As well as there's a couple big pits, rust pits on this side. They're pretty deep. You can almost see one right there. So I'm going to clean that all up, and I'm going to get those pits welded in place too, so that way I don't have to put so much body filler in that area. So that's what I think I'm going to do at this point. I do have some cleanup to do, break out the welder, and then we'll take a look at the finished product. Just before I finish welding all of this up, I wanted to just show you the gusset that I'm going to put on the top of the axle. You can see I have this already welded up. It welded up pretty good. It's not quite perfect straight, but it doesn't quite matter because there is a little bit of play with the center tube that goes down the center of this in the bushings. So I'm all set. I've already kind of test fit it on the tractor. But as you can see, I just took a piece of, I think it's 3/8 band iron. I just cut it to fit the tube and the back tube. Made a couple bevels. I'm going to go ahead and clean this area up, and then I'm going to burn this guy in real good. With that, it'll look nice and clean. It'll look almost stock original. Obviously, it won't, but it'll give me an unbelievable amount of strength in this area, so that tube should never break off. Now, I should not have any clearance issues with anything, because actually that piece will be right in between, underneath the engine, between the front plate and then the engine plate. So shouldn't have any interference. If I do, I'll just get the grinder and I'll just grind the top of it down and make it look nice, or just change it around. But as of right now, that's what I'm going to do. And then the next thing I believe I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and finish up welding a few other spots on the front end. As you can see, I did have to modify the top of the gusset. To be honest with you, I don't know what the heck I was thinking. It did interfere with the engine plate, so I just made this little sloping cut, and everything's clear, clean and clear. Everything's going to work just fine. I think that's more than enough strength to hold this all back together. And once it's all sandblasted and painted, you're not really going to see this side. For some reason, it didn't weld that well. On this side, I got it okay, I guess. It looks better, but it doesn't matter. It's all underneath the tractor. You're never going to see it anyways. The other thing I did also is I did weld up this corner of the tube right here. I built up the edge. It was all kind of, it was all kind of caved in right here. Not caved in, but like kind of gouged in. So I built it up with some weld, and I filed it to fit and sanded it to fit. So that way I wouldn't have to put any body filler in that, or not as much body filler. There was a big dent where one of the screws that hold the chain bracket, the plow chain bracket, made a big, huge gouge in the tube. So I filled that in. You're not going to see it because it's behind the front piece, but I thought I would do that anyways. The other thing I did, I'm just flipping over the axle here. This area right here was pretty heavily pitted, both here and on the down tube. So what I did was I just welded this area up real quick and then ground it flat. That way I didn't have to put as much body filler in that area to make it smooth. Now it's nice and solid, so it should be in good shape. With that, this piece is ready to be sandblasted and ultimately, trying to do this with one hand. This piece is actually ready to be sandblasted and etch primed. And once I do that, then I can put the bushings in the front end. I think I'm going to call it a video right here. Sorry that it didn't appear that a whole lot of progress was made in this video, but in general, there's a lot of work just to get these parts back up to snuff and get this thing to steer and track straight. So I appreciate your patience. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you like this video and you'd like to see the completion of this 1955 senior restoration or refurb. I don't know which one this is going to be, but basically me working on this 1955 Wheel Horse Senior. Please subscribe. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And when you subscribe, please ring the bell so that way you get notified when I put up a new video. As always, guys, thank you very much and have a great day.